What should you eat before, during, and after your workout to maximize muscle growth and body composition?
I would hazard a guess and say food. Here we go again with more stupidity from the internet. Roll the titles.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. As always, just a quick reminder that I'm now offering the SIBO organic acid stool test and consult via my website. So if you have any health or digestive problems, then consider taking these tests, as they will provide a lot of very detailed information upon which you can start making informed decisions and then start getting your health back on track. And on that bombshell, to the video.
This question refers to what's called peri-workout nutrition, which just means the timing of nutrients around a workout. And let me start by saying that while I will be giving detailed meal examples in this video, it's important that we start with what the science actually says about this question in the first place.
I can't wait for this.
Why does peri-workout nutrition matter at all? Well, in a now infamous paper titled Nutrient Timing Revisited, Aragon and Schoenfeld, quote, challenged the classic view of post-exercise nutritional intake with respect to anabolism.
I love how, according to Jeff, flashing up an obscure paper on screen constitutes fact and science. And I love the fact that somehow pulling out a sentence from said obscure paper also constitutes fact and science. And clearly, Jeff has never read the paper, because even the authors of the paper say that distilling the data into firm-specific recommendations is difficult due to the inconsistency of findings and scarcity of symptomatic investigations seeking to optimize pre- and/or post-exercise protein dosage and timing. So typical Jeff claims with typical Jeff lack of evidence.
And many science lovers took this single paper to be the nail in the coffin for the bro's now outdated anabolic window concept. Apparently, nutrient timing didn't matter after all. Well, it turns out many of the science guys may have jumped to conclusions a little too quickly, because even in this very paper, the author suggests that pre- and post-exercise meals shouldn't be separated by more than 3 to 4 hours, or maybe 5 to 6 hours if you eat a large pre-workout meal.
So what you're saying, Jeff, is that it could be 3 to 4 hours, or it could be 5 to 6 hours, but it's definitely accurate, yeah?
Let's just meet in the middle and say 4 to 5 hours between the pre- and post-workout meals is the true size of the science-based anabolic window.
Show me any clinical trials that support any of those claims.
Now, before we hop into the specifics, there's a future video that I'm trying to make that I really need your guys' help with. So if you go to jeffnippard.com/muscle IQ, you'll find a bodybuilding and fitness IQ test that I made that'll take you about 5 to 10 minutes to do.
Muscle Jeff and IQ in the same sentence. No, I think I'll leave it there.
And I'm doing this because I want to see how much you guys have learned from me over the years, and to test and see how smart you guys really are.
No, you want idiots to take your quiz and then buy your $39 plans at the end of the quiz.
So there's just straightforward multiple choice questions, and I think it'd be a very cool future video to see how well you guys do, and we can go over the answers together. So please do me a huge favor and go to jeffnippard.com/muscle IQ and take 5 minutes to do the test.
And do him an even bigger favor by buying his plan.
Okay, let's get to some meal examples. All right, so the pre-workout meal is the single most important meal of the day, in my opinion.
I am glad he is now not talking in absolutes, and particularly regarding pre-workout meals, there are no real significant reliable clinical trials on them and their impact on exercise performance.
That's because it'll ultimately determine how effective your training is, which ultimately drives muscle growth.
Again, there is very little evidence to support those claims. Many people are able to exercise at the same level, regardless of whether they had a pre-workout meal or shake.
And there are two main purposes of the pre-workout meal. The first is to fuel the workout, primarily via carbohydrate, and the second is to provide an anabolic environment during training, primarily via protein.
Jeff calls them pre-workout, and most people call them meals.
Now, when it comes to the macros for the pre-workout meal, I aim for about 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight, ideally coming from a lower glycemic carb source, plus a serving of fruit. This combination of carb sources will provide more sustainable energy through the workout, since different carbohydrates use different transporters, meaning different rates of absorption and more sustainable performance during training.
That is correct, Jeff, but it generally takes 5 to 7 hours for foods to travel through the small intestines. So if you eat breakfast at 8 AM and then you go to the gym at midday, your body will still be absorbing those slow release carbohydrates. So this magic notion of pre-workout is laughable.
I'll also aim for about 0.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight and 0 to 20 grams of fat, depending on how close the meal is to the workout itself.
If you're eating foods like chicken for protein, they have to be liquefied in the stomach, and then the proteins start to be cleaved apart with pepsin. And then when the food hits the small intestines, digestive enzymes further break down the proteins, fats and carbohydrates. Many of the proteins have then got to be reassembled for what your body actually needs. So unlike pure glucose and pure protein powders that will get into your bloodstream fairly quickly, the breaking down and digesting phase can take many hours, so it is likely anyway that the meal that you eat before you exercise will not have a significant impact on growth and recovery, etc. It is much more likely the meal that you ate 4 to 8 hours ago is going to have a much more significant impact than any magical pre-workout concoction Jeff is citing.
Well, up front, I was a bit surprised to learn that 33% of you don't eat a pre-workout meal at all because you train fasted. And that's okay, and I'll have some advice for you guys here in a minute. First, for the other 67%, eating 1 to 1.5 hours before training is usually ideal because if you eat the pre-workout meal too close to training, the food might still be digesting, and that can cause you to feel lethargic or bloated.
If you eat food 1 to 1.5 hours before workout, then much of this is still being digested in the small intestines. Unless it's pure glucose or pure protein powder, then it will take 45 to 60 minutes for the food to leave the stomach, and then the food will still be being digested in the small intestines over the next few hours. So what Jeff is saying clearly shows that he has no concept of how digestion works.
On the other hand, if you time your meal too far from training, you run a higher risk of having low energy or feeling lightheaded. So that's my sweet spot, but sometimes it's just not possible to wait an hour or an hour and a half after eating because of time constraints. Sometimes you're just forced to hit the gym on short notice, in which case you'll want to focus on eating a lower calorie meal with faster digesting foods. And by the same token, if you know you're going to train more than 1 to 1.5 hours after eating, you want to have a higher calorie meal and prioritize foods that digest more slowly.
Again, it takes 5 to 7 hours for foods to travel through your small intestines, so you will be absolutely fine for energy. Jeff is talking out of his hoop with this 1 to 1.5 hour nonsense.
Okay, so let's start with a pre-workout meal example based on a 175-pound, roughly 80-kilo male who plans to train in about an hour to an hour and a half. Based on his body weight and the macro targets that we laid out, he'll want about 80 grams of carbs, 40 grams of protein, and 10 to 15 grams of fat. So for this meal, we're making a good old bowl of protein oatmeal. So basically cook 80 grams of oats and mix in 1 scoop of protein powder. I use PE Science Select Protein, which is a blend of casein and whey, and it mixes really well with oats. Now, full disclosure, I am sponsored by them, and shout out to my girlfriend Stephanie for the cake pop flavor idea.
Maybe a conflict of interest there, Jeff, hey?
Top the oats with a sliced banana, half a tablespoon of peanut butter, and a pinch of cinnamon, which may help keep blood glucose levels more stable into the workout, and a sprinkle of sea salt, especially if you sweat a lot during training. And you can see the full calorie and macro breakdown of the meal here, which, of course, you can tweak to fit your body weight and total daily calories.
Okay, great, a nice breakfast recipe idea, apart from the unnecessary protein powder. But again, eat that meal 5 hours before your workout and it's still being digested, so this 1 to 1.5 hour rule that Jeff is talking about is absolute garbage.
Oh, and if you wanted to make this meal vegan, you could just easily swap out the whey casein blend for a vegan protein like a pea and brown rice blend. If it doesn't give the right consistency in the oats, you could just drink it separately as a shake.
Credit where credit is due for the vegan shout out, but again, I think that most people will acknowledge that Jeff is attempting not to leave any potential money on the table by covering as many people as he can to push powders.
Next, let's look at a pre-workout meal for a 120-pound or 55-kilo female who will be training a bit later, so in roughly 2 hours. Again, based on her body weight, she'll want about 27 grams of protein, 55 grams of carbs, and 10 to 15 grams of fat. And because this meal is being eaten 2 hours before training, it'd be smart to have a bit more fat than usual and a bit more fiber than usual to slow down digestion and ensure nutrients are still available for fuel into the workout.
Again, he clearly has no idea as to how digestion works in the human body.
So for this meal, we're doing 4 ounces of salmon, a medium-sized sweet potato, a mixed green salad with some light goat cheese, plus some apple slices with cinnamon. And here you can see the full calorie and macro breakdown for this meal.
This meal will still be being digested 5 to 7 hours after eating it like the previous meal. So again, more garbage voodoo that Jeff is trying to bamboozle his audience with.
As a third example, let's consider someone who's in a rush and needs to train within the next 20 to 30 minutes and hasn't eaten for hours. They should definitely eat something, but if they have a big meal, they might feel bloated or sluggish. So in this case, I'd recommend something light and quick, like a whey protein shake and a banana. These nutrients need to be absorbed quickly, so we don't want much fat or fiber, and here you can see the full macro breakdown for this quick snack on the fly.
Again, if you eat food 4 to 5 hours before, that food will still be being digested in the small intestines, so you will still have an active supply of calories and nutrition. But according to Jeff, no, you need to believe him that it's imperative that you eat 20 minutes before you exercise, or your muscles simply won't work.
Alright, but what if you're one of the 33% who trains fasted? Well, let's remember the 2 reasons why pre-workout nutrition matters in the first place: to fuel training performance and to create an anabolic environment. When it comes to fueling the workout, yes, generally speaking, having at least some amount of carbohydrate before training will benefit performance.
Yes, and if you ate carbohydrates in the last 5 to 7 hours, then you will still have an active supply of carbohydrates entering your bloodstream because it takes 5 to 7 hours for the foods to travel through your small intestines. It's not really rocket science, is it?
However, I know from my coaching experience that some people simply will perform better when they train on an empty stomach. That's usually because they train very early in the morning and either don't have the appetite or feel sick and nauseous if they eat right away. This isn't a deal breaker. World record-holding powerlifter Russell Orhii trained fasted for years, and while I think he's recently switched away from that, he was still able to reach truly elite-level strength and size without a pre-workout meal.
Correct, so stop pushing something that is only based on your opinion and clearly has little to no effect.
However, if you are planning on skipping the pre-workout meal, then the intra-workout and post-workout meals suddenly become much more urgent.
Nothing that Jeff says here is supported by anything other than hot air.
So, on that note, let's cover intra-workout nutrition, or what you should consume during the workout itself. Now, up front, I'll say that intra-workout nutrition definitely isn't required for everyone, especially if you've already had a well-timed pre-workout meal.
It's not essential for anyone unless you're running a marathon, for example, then I will concede this may benefit the athlete.
But there are a few circumstances where it does make sense. If you train fasted, if you're in a caloric deficit and already very lean, if your workouts last longer than an hour, or if you're an elite level trainee trying to optimize every little detail. And if any of these apply to you, I definitely recommend having some kind of liquid carb source during your workout, such as Gatorade, Kool-Aid, or Tang, to fuel performance.
Loves pushing those products.
As a general rule of thumb, I recommend 0.5 grams of carbohydrate per minute of training, starting about 30 minutes into the workout. So if your workouts last 90 minutes, you'd consume 30 grams of carbs starting 30 minutes in. However, if you're cutting and you'd rather not waste that many carbs on liquid sugar, then even just 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrate can go a long way for stabilizing blood glucose and turning a bad workout into a good one. And if you do train fasted, or just want some extra anabolic insurance, you can optionally add 5 to 10 grams of EAAs, or essential amino acids, or if you don't want to drop any extra cash on EAAs, just sip on about 10 grams of whey protein.
Can you actually imagine living and eating this way on a daily basis?
Okay, so the urgency of the post-workout anabolic window has definitely been exaggerated by some gym bros. Remember that there is in fact a 4 to 5 hour window bracketing the workout, meaning if you ate your pre-workout meal 1 hour before training, then train for an hour, you'd theoretically still have 2 to 3 hours to play with for getting in that post-workout meal.
And equally, there's a 5 to 7 hour window before workouts, but Jeff doesn't seem to understand this because he hasn't got a clue about digestion.
On the other hand, if you ate your pre-workout meal 2 hours before training and then trained for 2 hours, you should get your post-workout meal in as quickly as possible. So, same as with the pre-workout meal, I recommend consuming 0.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight post-workout. So if you weigh 180 pounds or 82 kilos, you'd want about 40 grams of protein. Carbs are relatively less important in the post-workout meal because you no longer need to use them as an immediate energy source. And most typical weight training sessions don't actually deplete as much glycogen as some bodybuilders lead on anyway.
My head literally hurts listening to this garbage.
Plus, research shows that any lost glycogen should be replenished within 24 to 48 hours as long as you're eating some carbohydrate at some point after training. However, because rates of glycogen resynthesis are at their highest within the first few hours following training, it would be smart to include at least some carbohydrate in the post-workout meal, especially if you do full-body training or 2-a-day workouts where you'll be hitting the same muscle again within the next day or two.
Unless you are keto or carnivore, then this is completely irrelevant.
Assuming you have plenty of carbs to spare, then 1 to 1.5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight is a good target. However, when cutting, you may be more limited on carbs, in which case something around 0.5 grams per kilogram may be more appropriate. And I'd recommend including another serving of fruit in the post-workout meal as well. Now, when it comes to fats, I don't think they're as big of a deal in the post-workout meal simply because rate of digestion is of relatively less importance. The workout has already been fueled, and there's typically no major urgency to get those nutrients absorbed as quickly as possible.
Again, this is all irrelevant if you understand the notion that it takes 5 to 7 hours for foods to travel through your small intestines, which is the part of the gut where you absorb your nutrition. Somebody please start the hashtag 5to7Jeff.
Still, if you do find yourself on the outer edge of that 4 to 5 hour anabolic window, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep fats down below 10 to 20 grams just to ensure digestion isn't slowed down excessively. Under most circumstances though, this isn't something I personally nitpick over too much.
Again, statements that are completely and utterly irrelevant for most.
Okay, so let's look at 3 optimized post-workout meal examples. Up first, again, we have our 175 pound or 80 kilo male with a post-workout macro goal of 40 grams of protein, 80 grams of carbs, and 10 to 15 grams of fat. This is a post-workout meal I'll personally have very often. So I'll mix up a bowl of extra lean ground turkey, jasmine rice, low-fat sour cream, low-fat shredded cheese, and sriracha, and then I'll have a sun gold kiwi as my post-workout fruit source, for obvious reasons.
Oh my.
And a mixed green salad to hit some veggies, and if you need some extra protein, you can add a glass of milk or just some extra ground turkey as needed to hit your protein target.
Still sucking on animal boobs, I see, Jeff.
And here you can see the total calories and macros for this meal. The second example is the 120 pound or 55 kilo female lifter, and she could do something like 4 ounces of chicken breast or a protein equated amount of tofu as a vegan option, with 300 grams of baby golden potatoes, a few steamed Brussels sprouts, a small handful of salted pistachios, and 100 grams of mixed blueberries and raspberries. And these are the calories and macros for this meal.
This is bordering on an eating disorder. If a person undereats for body image and they are painfully thin, then clearly they have a psychological issue. Yet Jeff has to eat and eat and eat to continually make himself bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is somehow accepted as normal. This is Jeff 4 years ago, and this is Jeff now. Where does it stop?
And then finally, let's cover someone who trained fasted and has to drive back home or go to work before they can have their next meal in another hour or two. In this case, I would recommend having a protein shake right after training, plus a serving of fruit like a banana or some grapes, and depending on your total carb intake, perhaps a couple rice cakes as well. So
more sound advice based on accurate and sound science.
this would be the total macro breakdown for this quick post-workout snack, and then they would have their first whole food meal a couple hours later. And before you guys click out, I want to tell you about a very important announcement. So, over the last few months, I've been beta testing and helping customize, in my opinion, the best nutrition and macro tracking app the industry has to offer. I've been working on it with 2 of my good friends and sports nutrition experts.
Another pitch, and now I'm done with this rubbish. Jeff doesn't change, more garbage in his video based on nothing more than hot air coming out of that gap in his face. Anyhow, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this one, then be sure to check out this one up here because I'm sure you'll find it equally interesting. And the only other thing that's left for me to say is to remember to look after your body because it's the only place you have to live. And I'll see you next time.